Okay. So did you play Rack 1 a lot before you went for world record? Because you had something called like the BOP project, right?
Yeah. So the bot project and my Rack 1 grinding were two totally different things.
Okay.
The long and the short of it is that I was a specialist in Rack 3, and I didn't really play a whole lot of Rack 2 or Rack 1 for a very, very long time. I want to say I speedrun nothing but Rack 3 from like, the very, very beginnings of my speedrunning career, like back in late 2012 to maybe mid 2016.
Goodness.
So I really only played Up Your Arsenal, and I didn't even play that seriously until late 2014 anyway. So basically for a while people knew me as the Ratchet 3 guy. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time I ever played Ratchet 1, there was a lot of talk because the majority of people in the community at the time ran Ratchet 1. A lot of people had said that you can't really consider yourself a Ratchet runner unless you're good at Ratchet 1. And I actually agree with that quite a lot. I think nowadays there's a lot more merit for people to establish themselves as solid community members without having grinded Rack 1. But at the very least, up until around 2017, 2018, I would have agreed with that sentence wholeheartedly. I think it's such a fundamental experience in the Ratchet series. And for a long time, a lot of people would ask me, when are you playing Ratchet 1? You have to play this game. Mm-hmm. And I didn't touch it until another runner, Nuka Duka, made a bet with me. Okay. I forget exactly what the bet was about. I think it was, I remember. I did a 12-hour challenge for Ratchet 1 New Game Plus. And that had been my first time ever playing the game. And he told me that if I could get a sub 40-minute run before the 12 hours were over, then he would run Ratchet 3 for a week. And so I grinded really hard because I hate losing at anything. And so I ended up getting it with, I want to say, 3 to 4 hours to spare. And I got like a 38 or something like that, which, I mean, is even back then was not a very good time. But still, to go from 0 to sub 40 is that quickly. It still takes a lot of effort.
Right.
And so he ended up grinding it for a week. And I didn't really touch Ratchet 1 again for a very, very long time. Up until the Rixer had world record with a 23:43. And once again, my competitive nature took over, and I said, I could definitely beat that. And I grinded pretty hard for a couple of weeks, and then I ended up beating it by exactly 1 second.
There you go. That's all you needed.
Yeah, it's the most important one.
That was part of a larger project called the Bot Project?
No, so the Bot Project was something very different.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a very different thing. That's to give you just a bit of backstory there. 2016 was definitely my most dominant year in the Ratchet community. Mm-hmm. I had, I want to say, what was it? I think I simultaneously held 10 main leaderboard world records. And I had gotten like another world record in another one that had been taken just before that. And so I was sitting nice and pretty for a long time, but then everybody started catching up and a lot of people became specialists at very specific categories. And so I ended up losing, I want to say, half or more of those records over time. And so there was a lot of people who were like giving me shit for it. They would, everybody loves to smack talk in the community.
Right.
And so people were being like, oh yeah, you're not going to get your world records back or whatever. And so one day I got really pissed and I was like, fuck you guys. I'm going to take all my records back. And so I put 10 categories in the Bot Project, either categories I had previously had world record in or I'd never once held world record. And I ended up getting 9 out of 10 world records. The only one I didn't was Ratchet 1 NG Plus because I just didn't really want to grind it. To be honest, I'd kind of lost the love for the category by then.
Okay, that's fair. Especially since you said you never even played it until the 12-hour challenge, right? So
yeah,
it wasn't like a nostalgia thing.
Yeah, Rack 1 was never really the most important one for me personally, but yeah, I mean, I did play it a bit when I was a kid. It was mostly my brother's copy of the game, and I stole it from him at some point. I forget when, but you know how it goes with the
I gotcha.
little big brother dynamics.
I hear you. Okay, so then let's see. I used to have my notes up. I had my I had the Strat archive. By the way, the Strat archive is super dope. You guys should feel proud for having something like this. This is amazing.
Yeah, I remember we made that because everybody kept getting pissed off. There were two different parties who were getting pissed off. There was the party of people who kept finding stuff we had already found 3 years ago. And then there was the people who were just so annoyed that this kept happening over and over. So eventually we all just collectively said, all right, we need to actually have an archive for this. And yeah, we kind of have a floating one in the Discord channel, as well as a lot of specialized channels that have their own strats and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm trying to see here. Yeah. So you took the 23, 42, and 2016.
Yes.
So were you following along with the game, with the history or the people, the stuff going on around then, or?
Oh, it was impossible not to.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, the two most prominent Ratchet streamers were myself and the Rixer. And I was very firmly a Rack 3 streamer, and he was very firmly, at that point, an established Rack 1 runner, even though he had also done Rack 2 and 3. But, the largest number of people by far were playing Ratchet 1. There was just no way you could ever be a part of the community without hearing about all the different Ratchet 1 updates, all the different races, the different world record, people taking world record from this person, all the different rivalries. You couldn't not know about it back then.
Okay. That's fair. I imagine even as a community, even if, let's see what I'm trying to say, even across different games, it's still pretty similar enough. I think most people would be able to follow along with everything going on.
Yeah, for sure. Rack 1 definitely plays fundamentally a lot differently than the other Ratchet games, but it still has a lot of the same core concepts. Momentum preservation, a lot of different out-of-bounds type stuff, like clipping through walls, things like that. Stuff you see in every other Ratchet game. It's just a little bit more specific as to how certain tech works in that game.
Okay. Now you said you were running Rack 3 even back in 2012. Were you following along, like even at the very, very, very beginnings, like with Ticeman and Envy and Caveman and stuff?
Not really, no. The only runners I really knew, I knew a small handful of them, but not all of them. I barely knew any of the Ratchet 1 specific runners. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until 2014 when I became reacquainted with the community that I would actually, start to learn who everybody was and what all the storylines were. But I missed the very, very first generation of Ratchet 1 runners. I kind of only learned much about Ratchet 1 speedrunning in 2014. Okay.
Would that be with Nuka and with Cypress?
Yeah, that would be with Nuka, Sippy, IN, Slaughter, Vortex, Raikaru, those people.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell me about Nuka's 3028.
Oh, the 3028. It is by far one of the best old school runs the community has ever seen. So Nuka, bear in mind that Nuka is perennially the poor person of the community. I mean, we're all kids at this point. None of us really have any money, but for some reason, Nuka just can never get a PS3 throughout any of this. He gets a PS3 in 2017, I think, and then runs a few Rack 1 categories for a week or two and then just doesn't want to run them anymore. But back in the day, Nuka ran on PS2 back when everyone else ran on PS3. And even back then, PS3 is by far the fastest system now. I would say by at least 5 minutes. Maybe that's a little bit generous, but somewhere around the 4, 5, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less minute mark. And even back then, before we had all of our new strat updates, it was still pretty much the same way, where PS3 is by far the fastest system by at least a few minutes. And so the fact that Nuka can come in as a PS2 runner against all these other PS3 runners and still get a 3028, which was, better than every other person at the time, it really speaks to how great and how far ahead of everybody else he was for the longest time. I think on a PS3 that would have been like a 26-ish, maybe a low 27. And I don't even know when world record catches up to that. So the quality of his run was just so far beyond everyone else. And it was, there really only was 1 or 2 big mistakes in it. And one of them became so iconic because it was one of the only big mistakes in that run. It was okay. So on Orkson 2, you can clip through a door by jumping on top of this little, it looks like a doghouse. You can jump on top of the doghouse looking thing. It's where the little Clank bots go into to lower the doors all throughout the level. You jump on the doghouse, and if you're standing at a specific angle, you clip through the door. But if your angle is just barely off, you clip through the ground instead of the door, and you fall to your death. And
I remember that. I remember seeing that when I watched the run.
Yeah, it's such an iconic death because everyone has experienced that at least at some point when running Rack 1. Actually, I think nowadays there's a couple alternative strats you can use to get around that. I know in All Gold Bolts you use a different strat, but or at least in All Check Marks, I should say. I'm not really sure what All Gold Bolts does. But everybody has experienced that at some point or another. And so that became such a recognizable thing, 1, because of that run, and 2, because, everyone dies there eventually. And it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it's like a 8 to 10 second death. So in the grand scheme of things, there are much worse ways to lose time. But that is the Nuka for sure.
Here we go. Yeah, for a 26-ish time, we don't see a low 27 until Ricky and Slaughter, and then Ricky again. That's in February of 2016.
Yeah.
So a full year later, we wouldn't see people catching up on PS3.
Yeah.
What?
It really was amazing how good he was. And he always has been very good at picking up games quickly. Even when he played Up Your Arsenal. And I mean, this was back in 2017, maybe even 2016, I forget. But it was significantly harder to get a sub 40 at this point. I mean, I know some people who've been grinding for a couple months now and still haven't gotten sub 40. I mean, granted, on and off, but there's still, active participants in the community. Nuka comes in and gets a sub 40 in less than a week.
Goodness.
So he's just always been very, very adept at picking things up quickly. So it makes sense that he would be so far ahead of everybody else. And even when he got his PS3, he hadn't played the game seriously in a couple of years at that point, and he was still having really competitive times really quickly in all the categories he chose to run. I think he put the most time into any percent. I forget though. I might be mistaken about that.
It's all good. He's just a god gamer, I guess.
Yeah, he's. Didn't I say that in one of my GDQ runs?
I don't know. It's been a while since I watched the GDQ runs. I'm going to watch them before I do the video, but yeah.
I feel like I said almost that exact sentence at some point. But yeah, no, he really is sick. He ran Half-Life for a little bit, and that's also a really difficult game. He got pretty adept at that pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean, he really was the apex of Ratchet 1 running for a very, very long time. I mean, in part because there weren't that many other people taking it seriously, except for, funnily enough, the only other person taking it seriously was Insomniac Nintendo, who also still doesn't have a PS3 to this day. So the only two people who actually seriously grinded this category back then were the only two people who could never get an optimal time. I think IN he ended up beating Nuka's run, his 3028, a while later. I mean, mostly it was for pride purposes. And then I think Scaff, now known as Henry in the community, I think Henry also ended up beating IN and Nuka's PS2 times for pride as well. I don't know. The Ratchet community has a long history of pissing contests for the sake of pissing contests. But we wouldn't really have it any other way.
There you go. I mean, competition breeds, innovation. And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Makes people strive. Makes people want it. It
Yeah,
feels easy.
definitely.
If everyone was just all, butterflies and rainbows and shit, be like, I don't know. No one would be motivated, I don't think. So yeah. I get it.
It's kind of an about face for how things are nowadays, I will say. I would say nowadays, a lot of the time, people, I don't know if we were necessarily discouraging other people back then. I think that's kind of a cruel way of putting it. But I think nowadays, everybody tends to be a little bit nicer about actively promoting other people and being like, hey, I think you can do this. Like, go ahead, take world record. I want you to beat my time. I want to have, a reason to improve, things like that. Whereas before, back in the days, people did some grimy stuff. Like we definitely did we had like, I don't know, if we ever wanted to put together a list of like a grime, like a top 10 grime moments, I'm sure we wouldn't be able to find, or we wouldn't be too hard pressed to find some of those moments in there.
All right.
But yeah, people were definitely a little bit more, I'm not sure what the right term is here, but we were willing to play a little bit more dirty than we are nowadays.
Oh, boys will be boys, I guess.
For sure.
Okay. Let's see here. While we're on the topic of insane runs, did you see, or what do you think about Ticeman's 3846?
Tice's 3846 as well, I would say there's a generational run at almost every point in Rack 1 history. I would say the biggest runs are Tice's 3846, Nuka's 3028, Ricky's 2343, and now Franz's, 1918? Scaff as well, back when he had a 21. That was also like a generational run for that era of Ratchet 1 speedrunning. Yeah, I mean, that is the first great Ratchet 1 run. It hit, I mean, the game was so much harder back then than it is now. In some ways, not in every way. I mean, in some ways, the way we store momentum nowadays is just crazy, and a lot of the movement becomes very unforgiving. But back then, it was a lot more like risk it all to hit this one trick. Like, you didn't have any ways to save yourself. You didn't have infinite jumps. You didn't have PDA side flips. You didn't have these cool ways that we have now. Nowadays, the meta is about going fast. And if you lose your speed, then you're losing time. Whereas before, it was you have absolutely no way of saving yourself. You have to go insanely risky in all these different places. And if you die, you just lose 30 to 45 seconds. So all that considered, it's just crazy the kind of stuff he does. I mean, Hoven SI is probably the most, probably the most impressive thing he ends up doing in that run. But there were just so many SIs you had to do throughout the game, and if you messed up any of them, you're just dead. So it really is wild to see. One, how skilled he was back then, and two, how far the game has come along since his time period.
Okay. Yeah, I've been told that this sort of era, the sort of the end of Ticeman and the beginning of with the Cypress and Nuka and stuff is kind of like, I think Slaughter referred to it as the skateboarding era. It's like the freestyle era, right? It's like you got to get from point A to point B, but instead of being like, this is optimal, it's like, this is sick.
Yeah. That definitely makes sense. That I can definitely agree with that. There was a lot of emphasis placed on swag in the community back then. If a strat was really, really cool, you did it just because it was fun. And it's funny. I mean, one of my favorite moments of recent history was when I think this was one of the first times I ever talked to Tice, because I missed that era completely. And I remember talking to Tice a few years ago at this point. And he actually did not want to talk to Slaughter because he referred to Slaughter as the man who ruined Rack 1. In Tice's firm opinion, nowadays, I'm sure he was half joking then as well, but nowadays he has a full appreciation for how sick the game is. But back then, when Slaughter found infinite jumps, and thus it completely invalidated, Hoven SI, all this other crazy tech that Tice did in his run. Tice was understandably bitter about it because he had put so much heart into his run back then. But yeah, with people like Slaughter, Nuka, IN, and Sippy all coming around, there was definitely a whole new wave of appreciating really brutally difficult strats and or strats that just were really awesome. And a lot of them ended up being they're still relevant to this day. I mean, mid-airs, mid-air long jumps, infinite jumps, infinite long jumps, and then cineflips came shortly afterwards, but then also infinite side flips, things like that. They're all really, really crucial for the run. And so it's this era of just finding things just to find cool things ended up, pushing the community well beyond the scope of anything we thought possible.
All right. Yeah, I've heard that infinite jumps. I think Ticeman himself told me that infinite jumps kind of killed off the freestyle era. Because it's like, why would you want to do sick movement when doing infinite jumps is like the easiest way to get from point A to point B sometimes?
Yeah, I mean that is also very true. Yeah, I guess like a big reason why so much could spawn off the back of infinite jumps was because it made the game much easier to be deathless. If you hit a trick incorrectly, you can just save yourself with the PDA. And this wasn't true in all spots. It wasn't until we found PDA side flips that the game became truly deathless. I mean, nowadays, if you straight up die, it's just because you're bad.
That's pretty fair. Yeah,
I kid you not. Yeah, that's not an exaggeration either. That's like, if you can't save yourself with PDA side flips, you either really miscalculated your distance, you miscalculated your height. There was something you fundamentally didn't understand about what you just did that caused you to die there. So
there you go.
Yeah, I mean, and also, I will say, I probably I know that people like Tice and Infi and people like that definitely did start the freestyle mindset, and it got kind of that whole mindset, as well as finding things that were fast, was perfected with the next generation. I will say though that the emphasis on optimization didn't really come into play until Ricky came around. He just kind of brought a whole new mindset to the game where, in his opinion, it is all about going fast. That is the most important thing. And I definitely understand that. For better or worse, that is, I think, the purest speedrunner mindset is faster no matter what. And so he kind of spawned the next generation of people who only wanted to optimize things.
Yeah, I think when I talked to Ricky, I think he said that the Nuka 3028 inspired him. That that playing on that the next year was essentially spent just trying to catch up to that, and that he's not wrong. That was about the year when Ricky started really pulling ahead, and he started beating out Prince, Vortex, and Slaughter, and really took the lead here. And that was right about a full year, and that's when he finally hit that 26-ish time to match up where Nuka was.
Yeah. And then I remember that once he hit at 26, he kind of took off. I remember at that point, it was, it was the race for Ricky to become better than the majority of people. And then it was the competition between him and Slaughter. And then once he beat Slaughter, it was just like he just rocketed forward. I mean, nobody was even close to competitive with him until I came around. But yeah, there was just a bunch of people who basically were like, I don't know. There's nowadays, I'm much prouder of the community for this. Before, there were people who would consider certain runs unbeatable, and obviously that's always, like an ideological fallacy. There's never going to be a perfect speedrun unless it's a game like, Dragster or games that can only be optimized by frames as opposed to by seconds. But I remember when he got to the 2043, there were people speculating that run would never be. That was it. That was all that Rack 1 had to offer. And I mean, obviously now that looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the impact that he had. That was how far ahead of everybody that he was for the longest time.
Okay. I think part of the reason why how he got so far was, I believe, it looks like direct skip and the Walloper were discovered or maybe utilized.
Yeah, so that's the pretty funny couple of things. And I think I talked about this with you last time, but yeah, the direct skip thing was complete accident. It's featured in one of EasyScape's most popular videos about like top 10 accidental discoveries. It is the thumbnail for that video. And so I remember that moment because that kind of changed our perspective about where we wanted the scope of this community, like what we wanted our community mindset to be. Should we do what we think feels right? Should we fight Drek just because it feels okay to fight him? Like you theoretically should fight the final boss? Or should we always prioritize what's fastest as long as it's within the scope of the rules that we've established for certain categories? And so that was, I remember that discussion. It was a very long discussion that we had in the community if we were going to allow it or not. And that's one of the there were a few conversations that we've had that have been pivotal as far as how we as a community approach certain things. That was definitely one of them. Yeah. And then the Walloper stuff, I just remember, I mean, he's kind of been forgotten in the community, but Maxis is just the game. There are some people as well on the strat hunting side of things that the game would not be the same without. And Maxis is by far one of the top people up there, even though a lot of people nowadays don't even know who he is. But yeah, as far as the more recent generations of runners, it's definitely Maxis, Cinna as well. Henry grinded a lot of stuff out. Ricky grinded some tech out. Nowadays there's like Izaki, people like that. So, yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. So you just wanted the world record, right? You just wanted to beat Ricky by any means necessary, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, basically, I'm a much more content runner now than I was back then. I want to lead with that.
All right.
But back in the day, I was competitive to a fault. Victory to me was the only thing that mattered. And when there's a bunch of people saying to me, this run, it's the best Ratchet run. It's unbeatable. No one's ever going to come close. In the back of my brain, I was thinking to myself, all right, well, if I beat this, nobody can deny that I'm the best. And that's what I just set out to do. I mean, I forget exactly how long it took me to get from starting my grind to getting world record, but I know it wasn't very long. I remember it being somewhere like 3 weeks, give or take a week. And it was just because I grinded and grinded and grinded, you know, like I was putting in hours upon hours every day. And it's, you know, when somebody else has already paved all the hard work, it becomes so much easier to come on in and reap the benefits.
Right.
It's much easier to follow somebody else's tracks through the snow than it is to pave your own. And so I was able to improve very quickly because I had already seen so many other runners do this stuff. I had a lot of people in my corner being like, hey, do this, don't do this. There are certain pitfalls you have to watch out for here and here. And as well as the advent of Cineflips really helped out. Cineflips are much, the community mindset nowadays is that they're much easier. They just take a lot of practice. But back in the day, I mean, there were maybe 3 people who could do them, myself included. And it kind of goes to show the diffusion of information as we move forward in speedrunning. But for the longest time, I was one of the only people who could consistently Cineflip because of my experience with Rock Band. As weird as that sounds, but yeah, before I speedran, I was a top-level Rock Band player. And so I had a lot of finger dexterity, as well as I had played, you know, a bit of piano, not that much, but I mean, I was a musical kind of person. I'd played drums, I played a little bit of piano. Obviously, I played plastic guitar. And so I could keep a beat and my fingers could move quickly. And so because of that, the rhythmic tapping of Cineflips that's required, I believe, if you want to do it, I mean, nowadays it's people have kind of understood that you can do it a little bit slower, but back in the day, I was one of the only people who could consistently put out, 13, 14 inputs per second between my 2 fingers. And that's what you kind of need somewhere in that ballpark to do Cineflips without being able to without dropping a single input. And so I remember that gave me a huge edge. It was really only about 15-ish seconds, I want to say. But at the top level, I mean, anybody can tell you 15 seconds is,
it's a big deal.
It is. It's a colossal deal. And
I mean,
so
you beat Ricky by 1 second, so 15 seconds.
Yeah, it made the difference. It really did. And I remember he was very bitter about that. I mean, we've never not been friends. I mean, there's maybe like a period of time where we weren't close. But for the large majority of the time I've known Ricky, we've always been close. And I know it hurt as his friend to see him feel bitter about that, because I knew he was thinking I only lost because of Cineflips. Because he and I mean, he's just as competitive as I am.
Right.
And so, there's the analytical side of any competitive person's brain will be, why did I lose? What went wrong here? And so, of course, if with that much of a massive time save, somebody's going to think I lost because of this. And that, is not the first time in Ratchet 1 history that somebody lost because of a new strat being found. And I'm sure that's not at all, the first or last time that'll happen in all of speedrunning. I mean, it happens on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Amazing runs become invalidated by one trick. And it's kind of
progress,
upsetting.
Man.
Yeah, that's unfortunately progress. It's a cruel, unforgiving mistress, but that is, if you want your speed game to continue, that's the way it has to be. And you either adapt or you die. Metaphorically speaking, obviously.
Yeah.
But nobody's literally going to walk into your room and shoot you if you don't have world record. Although that definitely would raise the stakes quite a bit.
I mean, Twitch chat will definitely give you hell for it.
But yeah, I mean, and that really ended up being good in the long run, because it lit the fire under Ricky's ass to eventually get good at Cineflips and become, the titan of Rack 1 speedrunning that he is today. But yeah, I mean, I'll admit it. I'll be one of the first people to admit it. I definitely pretty much only got world record because of Cineflips. I mean, granted, it's not like I would have stopped if I didn't get world record. I would have kept going and I would have beaten his time anyway. by probably a lot more than 1 second. But, you know, I've just never really enjoyed grinding Rack 1. And so when I got world record, Ricky was like, hey, like, honestly, I'll be a lot less bitter about this if you grind and continue getting a good time beyond this 1 second PB. And as his friend, I said, Ricky, I will absolutely do that for you. And then I was grinding Rack 1 for like 2 or 3 straight days after that. I didn't get a PB and I was losing runs left and right. And so I just threw down my controller, threw up my hands and yelled, fuck it. And then I went back to Rack 3.
As your friend, I will absolutely do that. Also, fuck you.
I was just like, yeah, I'm done. I can't do this. And that's kind of like, it's funny. I mean, nowadays that still reigns true where I'll say, I want to do X thing in Rack 1. And then I grind Rack 1 for a week. And I'm like, God, I fucking hate grinding this game. My God. And I think a lot of people get like that too. I mean, Rack 1 is by far the most reset heavy game. Especially in New Game Plus, because of the way the save feature works. You can put in resets very quickly, and the first 2 levels of the game are very, very specific. And so if you miss even 1 or 2 seconds worth of time on these 2 levels, people will just straight up reset. I mean, I have a lot of opinions about that sort of mindset of resetting if certain things aren't optimal, because obviously it's only the first couple of levels, so who really cares? But you know, people will have whatever opinions and mindsets they have. So I know Franz has like somewhere in the ballpark of like 16,000 resets or something like that. I mean,
yeah,
I remember it being more than the Ouya NG Plus resets I had at the time. And at the time I had 10,000.
God damn.
And I remember he had several thousand more than that. And he had been running for far less time than I had. I mean, it's just that easy to reset in Rack 1. It's a shorter category anyway. One of the shortest New Game Plus categories we have. And it's the reset system, like I said, is just so easy. It makes it so simple to reset on things. So, yeah, I mean, it becomes a slog to grind that sometimes. But some people really love the game regardless. So they'll put up with the resets. I can't do it. My attention span is just not there for that game.
It's all good. I hear you. Okay. So the next person to really take the torch would be Scaff.
Yes, it would.
Is there anything to say about Scaff?
There's a lot to say about Henry.
Henry.
A lot of, there's a whole slew of things to say about him. He was an interesting dude. He was very young at the time. I want to say he was maybe 17 or 16 or 17. So he was just a pretty immature dude. And I just remember, one of the things I'll always remember about him was that, and this, I don't know if you're going to want to put this in your video or not. This is not very, but I just remember that Scaff just, and this, I kid you not, word for word, this was the meme that spawned. Scaff just really wanted to have sex.
You know what's funny? I talked to one tabloid and he showed me the pinned message, which is, I just want to have sex.
Yeah, so anybody who knew Scaff decently knew that he was just like this goofball kid who, was in the throes of puberty. And, mood swings all over the place, just like could never hold down an opinion for more than 5 seconds. He's just this all over the place kind of dude, very typical Australian kind of guy too, very, very loud, makes his opinions very known. And I don't really, you know what? I remember why he chose Rack 1.
Why is that?
He was also a very competitive person. And this is back in 2016, back when I had a huge stretch of domination in the community. And I was the kind of person where if somebody was on course to take one of my world records, I would purposefully go back to that category just to deny them the world record. That's the kind of person I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so Scaff had been trying so many different categories, and he just wanted a single world record more than anything. He was like, I want to beat Xem at something. He couldn't beat me in Rack 3. He couldn't beat me in Rack 2. And then eventually he's like, I think I can try Rack 1. I think I can do this. And so he eventually grinded. You know what? I should take more credit for that. I should take credit for Scaff. You know, the community is lucky that I was such a stubborn ass. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had him on Rack 1. But yeah, no, he eventually grinded that, and I remember he also beat me by 1 second. And I knew Ricky was really happy about that. Ricky was so happy to see me beaten by 1 second, because he was. Yeah, I remember at one point he was just like, "How does it feel, Xem? How does it feel?" And I was like, "Yeah, this kind of sucks. I'm sorry."
Yeah. Well, unlike you, Scaff said, "I am going to continue moving on."
Hey, man.
And he kept grinding away, man. Gosh, he went for a whole year.
Yeah, he grinded for a really long time. And he was kind of, I remember, because there's always this big meme in the community about hiding strats.
Mm-hmm.
I forget where it all spawned, but there was always moments in the community where somebody would come up with a strat and then not tell anybody and then use it in a run. But it's only happened every so often. It's not a common occurrence. It's a very, very rare thing that ever happens, and it doesn't happen at all anymore. And
right. It's hard to hold strats when there's, everyone knows everything.
Yeah, exactly. But I just remember, there was like a hidden strat cabal surrounding Scaff, because everybody wanted him to beat my time so badly that they were willing to get into Discord calls together and concoct all of these ideas, all these new strats to give him like a few seconds here, a few seconds there. And it didn't stop when he took world record. He ended up, doing more with it. Like that whole collective, they ended up finding a lot more than that. But yeah, it was just funny. It was a very concentrated effort to help propel Scaff up to the top. He definitely was the people's champ. I'll say that much.
Special shout outs to Xem though, for real though.
Oh,
I mean, like specifically, like literally, I was making that as a joke kind of thing, but like literally because of you denying Scaff, every other category, he moved to Rack 1, and then literally the community was like, we need to do everything we can to move forward so we can beat Xem.
Yeah, that really was the meta for a long time. Was how do we stop this guy from taking all of our records and making us look like frauds? And really the answer the whole time, and this is true for all of speedrunning, is if you want to see change, just be that change. Focus on one thing and get really good at it. And then eventually, if there's a multi-game person, they will not be able to keep up. They will be forced to specialize in one thing at a time. They can't just do everything.
Good. That's good. Gotta keep moving.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Let's see here. I guess one of the last couple things I wanted, so let's move on towards the Ricky era again. So Ricky picks up the game again because of AGDQ 2018. And then I think he gets really close to the sub 20, and then that kind of pushes him to keep pushing all the way down there. So I guess could you tell me maybe the story behind the sub 20 and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think to this day, Ricky still might view that as one of his proudest speedrunning achievements. Is just that whole 7-month stretch of time from submitting and getting into AGDQ 2018 to doing his run to continuing into April, I believe. That I know he takes so much pride in that. And just knowing who he is as a person and seeing all the hard work he put into it. I know that he takes immense pride in all of that. And he overcame a lot of his demons during that grind as well. He was notorious in the community for being terrible at cineflips. For whatever reason, he could not move his fingers like that. He just couldn't. And so he would sit down hour after hour, day after day, trying to get down cineflips, and it took him months. I don't know if months is accurate for sure, but I know it took him at least a month of steady practice before he could even do it at all in runs. And this was, he was definitely, for somebody who normally comes in and is very good at learning speed games quickly, this was one of the hardest roadblocks he had ever experienced. He never had experienced being physically incapable to do something in a speed game before. And it really was a very triumphant story for him, where he could finally become not just a proficient Cineflipper, but one of the best at it. His consistency is incredible even to this day, and the speed and the frequency at which he can infinite long jump is also really extreme. And so, just taking back world record first off was his primary goal, and then from there grinding down to consistent 20s, consistent 19s. The day he hit sub 20 was one of the biggest days in the community ever. I think in general, it's kind of interesting to look at how things have gone in the community. As far as the more prominent names, like I said before, the two biggest streamers have always been me and Ricky.
Right.
And Ricky I've always been the person that people wanted to beat, and Ricky was always the person people wanted to be beat by. People in the Ratchet community really, really love Ricky. They really do. And so I think pretty much every single person in the community was cheering him on, and so to see the fan favorite of the Ratchet Discord hit this legendary time, people were saying, one of the best runs the community has ever seen. And people still agree upon that to this day. Like the amount of hard work he had to put in to get sub 20. I mean, obviously Franz has since surpassed him at Rack 1. But, he really was a maverick for the game. I mean, at multiple points in its lifespan, from the very, very beginning when he was involved in the community in 2012, 2013, up until he got his 2343, and then beyond that to, what was it, 1936? Was that
34?
34, that's right, because Franz beat that by 6 seconds initially. Yeah, so, I mean, he really, of all the people to ever carry the torch throughout Ratchet 1's history, I mean, you can't, there's no other person who could even come close. Everybody has had their periods, but I think Rack 1 really starts and obviously not ends, but certainly climaxes with Ricky. And it took Franz, proof of how long Ricky's stretch of domination was in Rack 1 NG+. After that point, Franz, I believe it took him 9 or 10 straight months of grinding, like consistently. We're talking, serious grinding to beat Ricky's time. And I mean, it's always going to be harder when it's your first speed game, as it was for Franz. It was the first time he'd ever tried to approach a top level of a speed game. But, it took him so long to beat Ricky. And even then, he only did it just barely. And nowadays, I mean, it's a lot harder. I mean, obviously, Franz has a much more established time with his 1918. But, Franz now has university that he has to deal with. He has a lot of stuff that he's dealing with personal issues and things like that. So he can't run nearly as much as he used to be able to. And I think people in the community don't know that they want Ricky to come back. Ricky does not want to come back, and people are very accepting of that. But I think if you were to ask people in the community, who's the one person you wish would come back out of anybody, I think you would almost unanimously get Ricky as your answer. You might get a couple variants here and there, but if you pull the top 3, he would be in everybody's top 3. Guaranteed.
Maybe Ricky is the people's champ.
Yeah, and maybe he was the people's champ the whole time. Yeah, there's, I think at a certain period in Ratchet history, it was pretty much anybody who could stand up to Xem as the people's champ. I really have been the heel in the community for the longest time, and a lot of my identity in this community has been learning how to accept being the heel. But yeah, you know, for a while it was Scaff. Everybody loves Scaff, and I mean, everybody like loves Ricky as well in the community. They love the passion that he brings to the game. They love his calm and composed demeanor for the most part, and they really empathize with a lot of his struggles. And he makes his struggles very well known as well. So, yeah, he's been a good person to have in this community.
Hell yeah. All right. I guess my last question is, when's 18?
When is 18? Well, let me see.
We're 20 seconds away, dude. Come on.
We're only 20 seconds away. So easy. Just go 20 seconds faster.
Dude, forehead. Come on.
Well, at this moment, the current community sum of best segments, so everybody's best times combined on every segment, is 1832.
Mm-hmm.
And the lion's share of all of these are Franz. So, considering that, for one, Franz can't even run anymore, at least very seriously. Two, considering that people don't really like grinding Rack 1 NG Plus anymore. And three, given how much we've already blown the door wide open on this game, I would say it will either take a major discovery that saves a lot of time. That's the most obvious way it could be done.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say if it's just going to happen the traditional way of get good and get better, I would say it would take, God, I don't even know who would do it. First off,
because
I don't know who would do it.
Ricky doesn't want to come back.
Ricky doesn't want to come back. I don't want to come back.
Franz maybe, but then he'd have to be done with school and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think Henry wants to come back either. Yeah, Franz would be pretty much the only person who would.
Maybe Izaki?
Maybe. Izaki has never been the kind of person to stick to one category for that long.
Okay.
He's very, very good at a lot of categories, but he's not top tier at any of them. I don't even know. I can't remember if he's ever even had a major world record at any point. And it's not that he's bad, it's just that he doesn't care about grinding. That's not what he finds fun in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what it would take, and I'm not going to give you a time frame because who the hell knows?
Exactly.
I think it would take somebody who's incredibly motivated to do great things in this community. And it would take a lot of determination and a lot of humility. Because I'm not exaggerating when I say that this run, Franz's current PB of 1918, is easily a top 3 run the community has ever seen. And so, if it's not going to be an experienced runner, it has to be a newcomer who either already is experienced at other games. I think that would probably be the fastest way somebody would get good at a game like this.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's just somebody who wants to prove themselves in some way to a group of people that they don't really know that well, it's going to take them a very, very long time. And they're going to have to understand that there's going to be a lot they're going to have to learn with it. So I don't know. The way that I also view a lot of this stuff is kind of logarithmically. So in a 10-minute run, I think, obviously depending on the degree of difficulty of the category, but a good run for a run that's 10 minutes long is usually within 10 or 15 seconds of sum of bests, right?
Right.
And then for a 30-minute game, it's usually somewhere around 45 seconds to a minute within sum of bests.
Mm-hmm.
So realistically, an incredible Rack 1 run could be within 28 seconds of community sum of bests, theoretically, but even that would take an unholy degree of consistency. So I think 18 will happen one day. I firmly believe. I think it's stupid to doubt at this point, considering if you had asked me 3 years ago, will we ever see sub 20? I would have said, hell fucking no, we won't see sub 20. And look where we are now. Yeah. So I will never, ever say that something is impossible in this game or any game really. But I think it's going to take a long time.
Yeah. It kind of goes to that idea of like, you know, when Ricky's 2343, people said like we'd never beat that. It's like 1918. We'll beat that one day. One day. Yeah, maybe not anytime soon, but one day.
Yeah, and I mean, there are still people who are strat hunting for things. You know, I know that
Pokitaru skip is what I keep hearing about.
Pokitaru skip is the great white whale. If that ever is found and ends up being faster, that would definitely clear the gap for sub 20 or sub 18. Sorry, sub 19 to even be possible in the first. It took me a second, like, holy crap.
Yeah.
But if that ends up ever being faster, then yes, that would very easily clear the path. But even that, I mean, I'm one of the few people who says Poke Skip will never happen. One, because as the heel, it's my job to try to encourage people to prove me wrong. And two, because people have just been trying to find Poke Skips since, you know, the inception of Ratchet 1 speedrunning. And we've gotten close, but there's still just these same barriers blocking us the entire time. But we live in a world where, you know, barrier skip on Wind Waker SD was just found. So who knows? Maybe someday.
Wasn't there one other thing that was also found recently? I guess maybe I'm thinking of more Zelda runs. I'm thinking of like Oracle of Seasons.
Oh, yes. There was a huge glitch found in, I think it was, I know for a fact it was Seasons. I don't know if it affects ages as well.
I don't think it does. It might. Maybe in some capacity, but yeah. I
wouldn't be surprised if it stayed, you know, kind of the same, like, or rather if it only affected one game, I should say, because I know like a very prolific Oracle of Ages runner or Oracle of Seasons runner. And anytime any two games are similar, somebody will say, oh, well, do you also run Oracle of Ages? And he always responds with saying, ew, no, that game sucks. So I would imagine they aren't quite different.
I liked Ages a lot. Anyways, we're getting off topic. Okay. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or that we haven't talked about that you think I should talk about?
Let me go through a brief timeline. I mean, I think if nothing else, I should actually ask you. I can't have you make a Rack 1 video in good conscience without asking you if you've heard about the drama.
Like the drama.
All the different rivalries that have happened over the years.
I think you probably told me. But like I think Raikaru had some stuff. Slaughter told me that I think it was Raikaru and Vortex were having an argument about like you suck, no you suck, no you're trash, no you're trash. And then Nuka was like, y'all know that Slaughter is like the best, right? And then he was like, hell yeah.
Yeah, it was I don't know, there's definitely been a lot of rivalries over the years that have happened in this game from various people. I mean, that is probably the highest Bill one. They were trading world record at the time. And I don't know, I want to make a comparison how this works, but basically it was like, imagine, you know, two Mr. Olympiad contestants are competing to see who's stronger. And then, you know, like you said, with Slaughter being the best one, it was like, there was like a 20-foot giant resting beneath the surface, waiting for his time to awaken.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically seems so trivial at the end of the day. But yeah, that was a very funny controversy between the two of them, you know, because they're both very strong-headed people. They both really, I mean, obviously they both held world record at some point. Neither of them were ever really that great at the game, in all honesty. So it was just so funny. It was in a way, it was like that meme of
the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man.
In a way, yes. But the meme I'm thinking of is the Simpsons one, where it's all those people surrounding the two monkeys fighting each other in a circle. Like, you know, it's like a monkey fight. Like they're all throwing money at the different monkeys and just watching them fight for their own amusement. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what it was. I remember being in a Discord call with Vortex when he was trying to beat Raikaru, and you know, he I just remembered he was like, "Okay, guys, this is the last run. It's 3 a.m. I'm exhausted. I can't even keep my eyes open anymore." And on this one random run, he ends up beating Raikaru, and he has like the legendary quote, which was just like, "Ha ha 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 ha! What up, Raikaru?" on his speedrun.com submission. But he also spelled Raikaru wrong. Because Vortex is dyslexic, so it just became like stupid meme where like anytime anybody wanted to dunk on Raikaru, they'd just be like, "Ha ha ha! What up, Raikaru?" So that's a pretty funny story there. I'm trying to think if there's any other really funny ones or like any interesting stories you should know about. There's always. That's not really too relevant. I was thinking there's like a glitch on some glitches on Umbrus that are pretty interesting, but that's not really relevant to the topic at hand. I guess the advent of solid state drive as well. I don't know if you've already heard from people about that.
Somebody told me. I forgot who it was, but somebody did tell me about it.
It probably would have been Ricky, if anybody, because he instituted the change.
I know that I had to ask him about it. Somebody else told me about it. It was probably Slaughter.
Okay, that would make sense. He was definitely around for all of that. That's a very, very important thing to take note of, because there's a huge dynamic shift from when people started or stopped running with hard drive or HDD and started running with a solid state drive. Because eventually Ricky learned that putting a solid state drive into a PS3 made it load much more consistently and faster. So eventually we made the jump there, and it ended up saving, I think, like 20 seconds overall. I think Ricky was the first person to ever institute that in a world record. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm looking at it. I see Scaff has a 21:22 on HDD. So yeah, it would have been Ricky. So that's also a big thing to note, was that really paved the way, not just for Ratchet 1 speedrunning, but it also inadvertently pushed Ratchet 3 speedrunning a lot as well. It made PS3 just, unanimously faster across the board for almost every single game. And let me see here. Is there anybody else? I'm like scrolling through the leaderboard list right now to see if there's anything I should talk about. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we've about covered all the really important stuff. As far as influencing world records and things like that, I think we've covered all those bases.
Okay, that sounds fine. Because we can always come back and do another touch-up call if there's anything that you think like, oh, I totally forgot. Oh,
yeah, sure.
Thing. Yeah, so
yeah, I'll make sure I message you if I think of anything. Have any Jimmy Neutron level brain blast?
Brain blast. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up here. So